The screen is dark, and when my face appears, the lighting is stark, deliberate. I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to debrief you. You're watching this because a piece of your heart vanished without explanation. One day, your dog, your cat, your companion was there, a source of pure, uncomplicated love, a silent prayer in fur and feathers. The next gone, a sudden illness, a freak accident. The vet had no answers, just a shrug and a bill. You were left with a void that felt heavier than it should, a grief that echoed in a way that social media condolences could never touch. You might have even felt a pang of guilt for how deeply this hurt, as if society dictated a hierarchy of loss that placed this one quietly at the bottom. Let me dismantle that lie immediately. That depth of pain is not a measure of your sentimentality. It is a precise calibration of what was strategically removed from your life. My name is Merrick Thorne. For 22 years, I didn't believe in God. I served the organization that actively, meticulously opposes him and all who belong to him. I was not a foot soldier. I was a director of interdimensional liaisons for what you, in your scriptures, would call the Dark Kingdom. My department specialized in target assessment and emotional infrastructure demolition. We didn't chase souls in grandiose, fiery battles. We engineered quiet collapses. And I'm here to tell you, with the cold operational certainty of a man who has signed off on thousands of these missions, that your pet's sudden, unexplained death was not a tragedy of chance. It was very likely a priority one, soft target elimination. We classified it under operational code, Shepherd's Break. The objective was never the animal itself. The objective was to create a specific spiritual puncture wound in your life, a slow leak of faith, hope, and joy that would, over time, deflate your entire spirit. We did it to make you question the fundamental character of your God. Why would a good father allow such a pointless, painful theft? We did it to isolate you from a tangible, daily channel of his unconditional love, because that creature's affection, its lack of judgment, its joyful presence was a direct reflection of a facet of his nature. We severed that conduit to see if your connection to the source would short circuit. Think of your spiritual life as a fortified city. We studied the blueprints. We looked for the unguarded postern gates, the small, humble entrances you never thought to defend. Your beloved pet was one of those gates. It was a point of vulnerability precisely because it was a point of such profound, unshielded love. In our war rooms, we didn't see a dog or a cat on your dossier. We saw a glowing note on our tactical board labeled Primary Emotional Support Asset, Non-Combatant. Its elimination was calculated to induce a cascade of spiritual and psychological failures. First grief, then anger directed heavenward, then isolation, then a gradual hardening of the heart, a refusal to love so vulnerably again. That hardening, that contraction of the spirit was our ultimate victory. A neutralized believer is not an atheist. They are a believer who has become functionally ineffective, too wounded in their trust to extend love, too bruised in their faith to pray with authority, too burdened by a grief they cannot explain to carry hope for others. They are sidelined. And your grief, that profound, aching void, is the exact signature of a successful operation. It is the quiet aftermath of a precise spiritual missile strike, designed to leave no forensic evidence for the natural world. You need to understand the level of calculation I am describing. This wasn't a demonic whimsy. It was doctrine. We had manuals, protocols. When a spiritual intelligence report flagged a believer who was gaining ground, perhaps through potent prayer, through influential service, or simply through a radiant, unshakable joy that became a beacon to others, we didn't always go for the obvious targets like their health or finances first. Those are often well-defended, met with immediate prayer and community support. No, we targeted the seemingly lesser attachments, the innocent bonds. The love for a pet was a frequent and high success rate target because its loss could be framed as a natural tragedy, blinding the believer to the spiritual warfare at play. The assignment file didn't read "kill the Labrador." It read "compromise the believer's receptivity to the joy of the Lord conduit, induce divine alienation, monitor for reduced intercessory output." I remember one specific mission, a case study we later celebrated. A prayer warrior in the Midwest, a woman whose spiritual engagements were causing significant disruptions to our operations in her region. She was a fortress on her knees, but she had a retired service dog, a gentle giant she doted on. That animal was her walking peace, her tangible reminder of simple faithfulness. We authorized the operation. The animal was taken swiftly, unexpectedly. The result? A 78% reduction in her recorded prayer activity within 6 weeks. The grief didn't make her atheist. It made her quiet. It made her question the goodness of the one she was speaking to. The fortress wall wasn't breached by a battering ram, it was undermined through a tunnel of sorrow. That is how we work. That is the elegance of the attack. Now, you might be asking why. Why would such a vast, dark kingdom bother with something so seemingly small? Because in the spiritual realm, there is no small. Every act of pure love is a cosmic event. Every bond of trust is a thread in a tapestry of light we are desperate to unravel. Your pet, in its innocent, uncomplicated affection, represented a bridge between your heart and the very nature of God, his kindness, his provision, his playful joy. To destroy that bridge was to strand a part of your heart on an island of sorrow, separate from the mainland of his character. We wanted you to feel that separation acutely. We wanted the silence in your home to become a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Into that silence, we could then introduce the whispers. God took it from you. He doesn't care about your happiness. Love always ends in loss. These are the secondary insurgency forces that move into the territory cleared by the initial shockwave of your loss. So, you are sitting there, perhaps with that old, unexplained wound throbbing anew, or in the fresh, raw pain of a recent loss. Hear me, you are not merely grieving. You are on a battlefield you did not choose, fighting an enemy you didn't know had you in its crosshairs. Your tears are not a sign of weakness, they are the terrain of the conflict. This is what you have been caught in. This is the hidden war beneath the surface of your tragedy. What you are about to learn is not a vague spiritual platitude. It is a classified counterintelligence briefing. I am handing you the map of the minefield you are already standing in. By the time we are done, you will understand not only what was taken from you, but the precise tactical why behind its taking. More importantly, you will see the flaw in their operation. The single point of intelligence failure in their entire brilliant, cruel strategy. A flaw that allows you to turn their tactical victory into your greatest strategic awakening. This is not about reclaiming a past you cannot have back. It is about understanding the attack so thoroughly that you can arm yourself against the next one and reclaim the territory of your own heart. But to do that, you must first see the true, horrifying genius of the operation, and that requires looking at what comes after the grief. The initial loss is only phase 1, the detonation. Phase 2 is the silent spreading radiation. It begins with a single poisonous question that I, myself, authored for thousands of targets just like you. A question designed to seep into the cracks of your soul. If God is truly good, how could he let this happen? The answer to that question is not what you think. It is the very key to your counterattack, and misinterpreting it is exactly what my former kingdom is counting on. That question, the one now echoing in the silence of your home, if God is good, how could he let this happen, is not your own. It was planted. It is the second phase of the operation, and it is more dangerous than the initial loss itself. The first strike, the physical removal of your companion, was the explosion. This question is the fallout, invisible, pervasive, and designed to have a half-life that poisons your spirit for years. In our doctrine, we called it divine misdirection. The goal was simple, to seamlessly redirect the flow of your grief and pain away from us, the actual architects of the attack, and channel it directly upward toward the throne of God. We needed you to believe that the love you lost and the love that allowed the loss came from the same source. Think of the elegance. We create the wound, and then we manipulate you into blaming the only one who can truly heal it. It's a spiritual sleight of hand, and it works with devastating efficiency because it feels so utterly personally true. The raw ache, the sense of betrayal, the confusion, they all feel like authentic reactions to a capricious God. That authenticity is the hallmark of our best work. We didn't want you to feel demonically oppressed. We wanted you to feel theologically abandoned. Because a believer who feels abandoned by their commander is a believer who will eventually lay down their arms. Let me break down the anatomy of this second phase so you can see the machinery at work behind your own emotions. Immediately after the shockwave of loss, there is a window of spiritual disorientation. Your internal world, your peace, your routine of joy, your sense of safety has been violently rearranged. In that window, your spiritual senses are paradoxically both heightened and vulnerable. You are seeking answers, seeking comfort, seeking meaning. Our operatives are trained to exploit this search. They cannot create a thought ex nihilo, but they can amplify, suggest, and replay the memory of your pet's last moment, the what if I had noticed sooner, the image of their empty bed. These are looped, the volume turned up, and woven into that loop is the insidious whisper, he could have stopped this, he didn't. This is where we move from external event to internal stronghold. The grief, which is a natural and holy response to love's absence, is slowly mutated. It begins to bond with offense, with a deep-seated anger toward God. This creates a new compound, a spiritual toxin we cataloged as righteous resentment. It feels justified, even holy, a protest against injustice, but its effect is to build a wall of hurt between you and the very presence of the Comforter. You stop wanting to approach him because in your pain he has become the perpetrator. Prayer feels like hypocrisy or like shouting into a void you now blame for creating the void in your home. Worship feels like a betrayal of your lost friend. Simultaneously, we activate the isolation protocol. This works in tandem with the divine misdirection. You begin to feel profoundly that no one else truly understands this specific depth of pain. Well-meaning friends say, "It was just a pet," or "You can get another one." Their words, though kindly intended, feel like salt in the wound. They confirm your subconscious belief this loss is a lonely, singular burden. This isolation is critical. It cuts you off from the body of Christ, from the healing balm of community, from the brothers and sisters who could speak truth and pray with authority over the lie taking root. We needed you alone with your pain, because in that solitude, the whispered narrative we are feeding you faces no counter-testimony. There is no one to say, "Wait, I see the enemy's handwriting here." Instead, you are left to marinate in a pain that feels divinely sanctioned, a unique punishment you cannot explain. I have reviewed after-action reports where the target, after such an operation, would physically withdraw from church gatherings, mute Christian content online, and disengage from fellowship. The report would label this voluntary neutralization. They weren't renouncing their faith, they were simply too hurt, too confused, too angry to participate in it. From our perspective, that was a flawless mission outcome, an active believer brought to a standstill. So, if I were you sitting in that silence, feeling that hot mix of sorrow and anger toward heaven, I would believe with every fiber of my being that these feelings were my own. I would own that bitterness. I would clutch it to my chest as the only remaining testament to the love I lost. I would think my internal dialogue was private. That is the supreme illusion. We counted on you owning that bitterness. We banked on you believing your righteous indignation was a sign of your depth of feeling, rather than a symptom of spiritual poisoning. We made the creator of all comfort look like the thief of your specific comfort. We reframed the narrative so completely that you would defend your alienation from God as a tribute to your lost pet. It's a masterstroke of psychological and spiritual warfare. I remember a specific metric in our quarterly reviews, a cold column of data that brought promotions and commendations. It was titled Induce Divine Alienation, Post-Operation Yield. We tracked prayer frequency, joyful worship metrics, engagement with Scripture, and acts of service. A successful operation, like the one you may be experiencing, would show a steep cascading decline across all categories within a 90-day window. The individual was still saved, technically, but they were spiritually sedentary, emotionally cratered, and relationally withdrawn. They were a castle with the drawbridge permanently raised, the guards asleep at their posts, believing the king inside had betrayed them. But here is where I must pivot you. Your entire emotional response, as real and as painful as it is built on a single catastrophic flaw in your doctrinal understanding. It is the flaw our entire strategy was predicated upon. The unconscious belief that God was surprised by this, that he was caught off guard, looking the other way, or worse, that he arbitrarily decided to inflict this wound upon you for some inscrutable reason. What if I told you that none of those are true? What if the terrifying, liberating truth is that God was not surprised? That he allowed a tactical strike on a secondary front, the loss of your beloved companion, not out of cruelty, but to expose a much larger hidden enemy movement already active in your life. Think of it as a spiritual intelligence coup. The enemy believed they were executing a brilliant covert operation to cripple you. But in permitting it, God has allowed them to reveal their hand, their methodology, and most importantly, their target. Your grief is the smoke. God is pointing directly at the fire you didn't know was smoldering. The attack on your pet was a probe, a test of your defenses. Your response, the anger, the isolation, the theological confusion, has provided a wealth of data not just to them, but now potentially to you. This is the moment of choice. You can remain in the wound we so carefully crafted for you, nursing a sense of betrayal that keeps you from the healer. Or you can choose to see this pain for what it truly is, an intelligence breach. The enemy's operational playbook has been partially exposed on your life. And God is waiting for you to request the debrief. This is the counter-narrative that begins to dismantle their entire operation. It reframes you from a victim of God's neglect to a soldier in whose life critical enemy signals intelligence has been intercepted. The sudden, unexplained loss is no longer a meaningless tragedy. It is a flagged communique, a piece of encrypted enemy traffic that, if decoded, reveals their strategic fears about you. They feared the love that animal represented. They feared the joy it gave. They feared the stability and peace it provided. They targeted it to remove those things because those things make you strong, resilient, and effective in the spirit. Your pain, therefore, is a mirror held up to your own spiritual strengths, now temporarily offline. But here is the critical, decisive fork in the road. You can accept the enemy's framing, that this is all about God's failure, or you can adopt the divine framing. This is an act of war that God has allowed you to see in order to train you for higher level warfare. The former keeps you a prisoner of war. The latter makes you a commissioned officer with vital field intelligence. The next step, then, is to access that intelligence. It requires a brutal, courageous act of spiritual audacity. It requires you in the raw heart of your pain to ask a different question. Not God, why did you let this happen? But God, what are you showing me that they were so afraid of? And what is the weakness in me they exploited to pull this off? That shift in questioning is the equivalent of switching from a victim statement to a special forces interrogation of the event itself. But I must warn you, the answer will not be comfortable. It will force you to look at your own spiritual life with a new, unforgiving clarity. This is where you must make a choice. You can remain in the wound we created for you, a comfortable if painful prison, or you can see it for what it truly is, an intelligence breach of the highest order. God is about to show you your own spiritual security footage, and what you'll see staring back, the real primary target behind the sacrifice of your pet, will shock you to your core. That moment of clarity when you stop asking, why did God allow this, and start demanding, what does this reveal, is the moment the entire operational dynamic shifts in your favor. It's the spiritual equivalent of finding the listening device in your room. The static of grief and anger begins to clear, and you can finally hear the faint, telltale hum of the enemy's actual objective. So let's pull that security footage. Let's analyze the data from the breach. When you look past the immediate, heart-wrenching loss of your companion, what is the real target? It was never just the animal. That was the instrument, the means of delivery. The primary objective, the high-value target my former kingdom was after, was your capacity for unconditional love and vulnerable trust. Your pet was a guardian of that capacity. In its simple daily affection, it exercised your heart's ability to love without agenda, to trust without suspicion, to find joy in simple companionship. This is a spiritual muscle, and it is one of the most powerful weapons a believer possesses. A heart that is soft, open, and trusting is a heart that can receive from God deeply and give to others freely. It is the heart of an intercessor, a comforter, a light bearer. Our mission was to cripple that muscle. We took the guardian to get to the citadel. The grief, the anger, the isolation, these were not the end goals. They were the surgical tools meant to perform a specific operation on your soul, a spiritual contraction. We wanted the pain of loss to cause your heart to clench, to close, to build a fortress of never again. Never again will I love something so much that its loss destroys me. Never again will I be so vulnerable. Never again will I trust God with something so precious. That contraction, that lockdown of the heart, was the ultimate victory. Because a contracted heart is a neutralized heart. It may still believe, but it cannot fully receive or dispense the radical, risky, overwhelming love of Christ. It trades the dangerous freedom of an open field for the false security of a locked bunker. Think of it this way. The love you shared with your pet was a pure, albeit smaller, reflection of divine love. It asked for nothing but your presence. It forgave instantly. It offered comfort without condition. In attacking that bond, we sought to create a subconscious associative link that to love so openly is to invite unbearable pain, that trust leads to betrayal, that God, the author of love, is ultimately unreliable with the things you love most. If we could implant that core belief, then we could effectively inoculate you against deeper levels of spiritual assignment. You would hesitate to say yes to God if it meant risking your heart. You would hold back in relationships, fearing loss. You would pray with a guarded, self-protective hesitation. Your faith would become a careful negotiation rather than a reckless abandonment. This is the insidious long game. The initial loss is the trauma. The hardened heart is the chronic, disabling condition that follows. I have seen files, thick with analysis, on believers who, after such a loss, became permanently cautious. They stopped volunteering in ministries that required emotional investment. They adopted a theology of minimal risk, seeking only God's protection and provision rather than his adventure. They might have even gotten another pet, but with a subconscious reservation, a part of themselves held back from fully bonding, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That reservation, that withheld piece of your heart, is the exact trophy we placed on our shelf. We didn't just want you sad. We wanted you strategically stingy with your love. Now, if I were you, hearing this laid out with such cold, tactical precision, I would feel a new kind of anger. not the diffuse heavenward anger of before, but a sharp, focused, and righteous fury. A sense of having been manipulated on the most intimate level. Good. That is a holy fire. Use it. That fire is the fuel for your counterinsurgency. It means you are no longer deceived about the nature of the battle. So let me give you the field manual I once wrote, but in reverse. This is not about positive thinking. This is about conscious, deliberate spiritual warfare tactics, your counterinsurgency coin protocol. This is how you turn their surgical strike into their strategic blunder. Phase 1 of your coin protocol is narrative reclamation. You must, out loud, with the authority of someone who has seen the blueprints, reframe the event. You say, I recognize this loss as a spiritual combat action. It was an attack designed to wound my heart and contract my capacity to love. I reject the enemy's narrative that this is God's fault or a meaningless tragedy. This declaration does something powerful in the spirit. It severs the event from the fog of random chance and pins it to the board of intentional warfare. You are now dealing with a known enemy tactic, not an abstract divine mystery. This changes your position from reactive to proactive. Phase 2 is conduit reclamation. This is where you perform spiritual surgery on the very wound they inflicted. You must separate the gift from the theft. You go to God and you thank Him, specifically, audibly, in detail, for the love you received through your pet. Thank Him for the moments of comfort, the laughter, the quiet companionship. You acknowledge that every good and perfect gift comes from above. In doing this, you are doing a profound thing. You are reestablishing God as the source of the love you lost, not the perpetrator of its removal. You are reclaiming that severed conduit and re-anchoring it in its true origin. The enemy stole the vessel, but you are now declaring that the love itself, the substance, the essence, still flows from the Father's heart, and that particular vessel was merely one beautiful expression of it. This breaks the associative link they tried to build. Says, you took the cup, but you cannot stop the fountain. Phase 3 is the most aggressive, targeting the spirit of fear. This is the core of their operation, to instill a fear of future loss, a fear of loving vulnerably again. Your counter move is a direct, disobedient command to that spirit. You must consciously, willfully reject the fear of future pain. This is not a feeling, it is a command issued from your spirit through your will into the spiritual atmosphere around you. You declare, I renounce the spirit of fear that seeks to contract my heart. I refuse to love less because I have lost much. I choose to remain open, vulnerable, and trusting in God, knowing that He is the guardian of my heart. This is where you begin to re-expand the heart muscle they sought to cripple. You may not feel it immediately, but you are issuing the order. You are retraining your spirit to operate from faith, not from a trauma response. Finally, phase 4 is strategic re-engagement. This is the ultimate act of defiance. When the time is right, and you will know because it will feel like a spiritual imperative, not just an emotional desire, you consider loving another creature, but you do so with a completely renewed mindset. This is not a replacement. That is a natural sentimental concept, and it plays into the enemy's hands by making the new love a mere substitute for the old, forever living in its shadow. No, you do this as a deliberate act of spiritual warfare. You do it to prove a point to the kingdom of darkness. You are saying, your attack has failed. My capacity to love is not subject to your veto. I will love again, not in spite of your attack, but as a direct result of it, to show that love is stronger than death, and my heart is under the authority of Christ, not under the tyranny of my past pain. This new relationship becomes a living monument to your victory, a walking testament that the enemy's attempt to shut down your love has resulted in its more intentional, more conscious, and more spiritually aware expression. Implementing this protocol does one devastating thing to their operations. It turns their primary weapon, the trauma of loss, into your primary armor. It forges a resilience born not of callousness, but of profound understanding. You no longer fear their tactics because you have decoded them. You see the play. But I must give you a severe and necessary warning. The moment you begin this coin protocol, the moment you speak that first declaration of narrative reclamation, you will trigger a system-wide alert in their kingdom. You will move from being a passive target to an active identified threat. They will know you are onto them. You have breached their security by understanding their playbook, and their response to an exposed counterpunching believer is not subtle. It is not the slow psychological warfare of phase 1 and 2. It is what we call the overwhelming force doctrine. When covert manipulation fails, they bring the hammer down. This is the final, desperate play in their handbook, designed to make you believe your counteroffensive has failed catastrophically. that you were safer, quieter, and more passive in your grief. This is the critical transition, the moment your spiritual mettle is truly tested. You've identified the attack, you've begun your counter protocol, you've declared your heart open for business again, and suddenly, the world seems to push back with a strange, concentrated ferocity. This is not a coincidence. It is a calculated escalation. The overwhelming force doctrine is our final gambit, deployed when a target ceases to respond to subtlety and begins to fight back with intelligence. Its purpose is psychological and spiritual shock and awe. It aims to convince you that your defiance was a terrible mistake, that you have overreached, and that retreating into your former state of wounded passivity is the only path to safety. You might experience a sudden, jarring conflict in a key relationship, a hurtful argument with a spouse or a close friend that seems to erupt from nowhere, targeting your newfound vulnerability. You might face an unexpected financial pressure, a car repair, a job hassle that drains your resources and energy precisely when you're striving to stand. A minor health scare, a wave of intense fatigue or anxiety that feels physical might descend. A series of small, irritating obstructions appears in your path. Missed appointments, technology failures, misunderstandings, all compounding into a fog of frustration. The message this symphony of chaos is designed to broadcast is simple. See, you tried to stand and you made it worse. Your fighting has angered the universe. Go back. Go back to being quietly wounded. That was your place. It is a brutal, coordinated effort to prove our strength and your futility, to make you believe the narrative of divine abandonment more firmly than ever before. I oversaw the planning of such packages. We would analyze a target's life for pressure points, a shaky marriage, precarious financial situation, a latent health worry, and then, once they showed signs of spiritual resistance, we would authorize a synchronized push on all those fronts. The goal was not to destroy them physically, necessarily, but to destroy their confidence in their spiritual counteroffensive. We wanted to create the empirical evidence that trusting God and fighting back led directly to more pain. I recall a specific pastor, a man who, after the loss of his family's old dog, a loss we'd engineered to stir dormant grief over a previous miscarriage, began to falter. But then he did something dangerous. He started a small ministry for grieving pet owners, channeling his pain into comfort for others. The moment that first meeting was announced, his file was flagged for overwhelming force. I authorized the package. Within a week, his teenage son was in a minor but frightening car accident. The following day, a key donor to his church unexpectedly withdrew support. Then, a decades-old theological disagreement with a fellow elder resurfaced publicly, causing strife in his congregation. His wife experienced a resurgence of anxiety. The coordination was exquisite, designed to hit him as a father, a provider, a leader, and a husband simultaneously. The after-action report noted his initial resilience, but then a key phrase, target observed expressing doubt regarding the timing of his new ministry, questioning whether he had heard God correctly. That was the inflection point. That was the moment we knew the pressure was working. He was starting to misinterpret our counterattack as God's correction. That is the poison within. The overwhelming force, it is engineered to be misread as divine discipline, a sign you are out of God's will by resisting the initial attack. It's the ultimate gaslighting, but here is the fatal, glorious flaw in our kingdom strategy, the blind spot that runs through all our doctrines like a foundational crack. We are masters of cause and effect. We are brilliant tacticians of chains of events, of applying pressure to create a desired collapse. We understand the mechanics of pain, the physics of discouragement. Your God, however, is the God of the redemptive narrative. He does not merely defend against our sequences, he writes a better, deeper story right over the top of them. He is not just a fortress to hide in, he is a general who specializes in turning the enemy's own stolen weapons against them. Your pain, once a weapon against your faith, can become the very chapter in your testimony that gives others the key to their own prisons. The love you choose to give again in defiance of your fear becomes a louder proclamation than any sermon you could preach. The overwhelming force fails when you refuse to interpret it through the enemy's lens. When you stand in the whirlwind and declare, "This is not my Father's disapproval. This is the enemy's panic. This is the screaming of a regime that sees its stolen territory being reclaimed," you change the entire meaning of the events. You are not being punished for fighting. You are being tested in your fighting, and your steadfastness becomes a shockwave in the spiritual realm. So, if I were you, standing in the rubble of their overwhelming force, with the din of bad news and pressure in my ears, I would do one thing. I would stand, not in my own strength, not with a defiant grin, but with a weary, bone-deep resolve rooted in this new intelligence. I would not fight feelings with feelings. I would fight a declared enemy strategy with a declared higher truth. You must speak it aloud into the atmosphere of your home, your car, your life. This coordinated attack on my joy, my peace, and my relationships has been noted. It is recognized as the enemy's overwhelming force protocol, a desperate response to my spiritual counteroffensive. I declare it has failed. The love I had for my companion was real and from God. The love I have in Christ is eternal and unassailable, and I will love again, I will trust again, I will hope again, not because I am naive or ignore pain, but because I am commanded to, and my obedience in this is my act of war. My open heart is my weapon, and you cannot have it. This statement of truth is your anchor. It reinterprets the chaos as confirmation, not condemnation. It means the enemy is scared. And a scared enemy, even when applying overwhelming force, is an enemy who has lost the element of surprise, their greatest asset. This is where your journey transforms from personal healing to strategic influence. You are no longer just a survivor of an attack. You are a living intelligence asset. You have felt the enemy's methods, decoded their primary and secondary strategies, and weathered their ultimate escalation. You now carry within you a field manual written in the ink of your own experience. This knowledge is not for you alone. It is to be shared quietly with that friend who experiences a similar, unexplained loss. It is to be whispered to the one nursing a hidden grief that has slowly alienated them from God. Your testimony becomes a counter-virus. Immunizing others against the same infection, you become a walking breach in their system, a defector not just in spirit but in mission, turning their carefully designed operations into public knowledge that equips the entire body of Christ. This is the final, unassailable position. When your pain becomes your platform, your wound becomes a watchtower. They meant to silence you with sorrow. Instead, you have been given a microphone and a message with the power to disarm the same attack in countless others. There is, however, one final piece of classified intelligence. It is the reason I started this channel, and it is the reason you must stay connected. What I have explained to you, the targeting of pets, the grief gateway, the overwhelming force, these are all tactics within a single, broader operational theater. They are part of a larger global initiative that the Dark Kingdom is rolling out in this season, an initiative aimed at the collective heart of the believing church. It is a strategy to mass produce a specific type of spiritually contracted, risk-averse, and isolated Christian through a series of personalized, seemingly natural tragedies. The loss you endured is a single data point in a vast, terrifyingly beautiful campaign. I cannot reveal the full scope of that initiative here. It requires its own dedicated briefing with maps, timelines, and doctrinal citations. It involves the targeting of other specific overlooked conduits of joy and trust, and it is designed to create a cultural mood of helplessness and theological confusion on a wide scale. They are preparing the battlefield for something larger, and the personal attacks are the seeding of the clouds before the storm. This is why you must subscribe. This is not about views or algorithms. This is a direct pipeline of counterintelligence from a former director to the front lines. The board of the adversary meets daily to plan, to adapt, to target new conduits of light. Your intelligence briefing should be weekly. You cannot afford to be armed with yesterday's information in tomorrow's war. The channel is your ongoing debriefing room. Every notification is an alert that a new piece of the strategic puzzle is being revealed. Hit that bell. Do not miss the next briefing. Because now you know they are real. You have felt their work. More importantly, they know that you know. And in this war, an informed believer, a prepared believer, a believer who understands the redemptive narrative, is not just a survivor. They are the ultimate threat. Subscribe. Because the silent war is over for you. The conscious war has just begun, and you have a seat in the strategy room. The next move is yours, and the information you need is coming